we are going to have one heck of a program. So with no further ado, Andy, John, take it away.
Can I get a round of applause for Ben Davis for one hell of a no vote effort? So thank you for the tax cut on behalf of Wichita school voters. So.
I expect half of what you say.
Well, I live in the Goddard School District, so you get nothing from me, brother, but feel free to come on out to Goddard. They're about to do it to me. So if you want to come out and put up a no vote for me, I'll take it. So Carl asked us to talk about the state of politics in Kansas and just in general. And so I will give you, and I'm sure we'll talk about the governor's race. We'll talk about all kinds of topics today. And Andy and I both decided we want to do largely through questions. But for me, the state of politics in America was on display Tuesday night, where you had, I've never seen, I think it's the first time the Democrats refused to escort the president, regardless of what party. I'm sure the congressional Republicans were no fans of Joe Biden, no fans of Barack Obama, and yet they still escorted him to the podium. When Obama or Biden would say something that was universally acceptable, patriotic or something that we could all get behind, even Republicans, Kevin McCarthy would stand and he would applaud. What we saw on Tuesday was disgusting. You saw Democrats sitting on their hands to a 13-year-old cancer survivor who wants to be a cop. You saw Democrats sitting on their hands to a fellow citizen who'd been held in a Russian prison for years, who'd just come back sitting in the audience in the gallery with his 95-year-old mother. Couldn't applaud at that. Couldn't applaud at the family members of Lake and Riley. Couldn't applaud at that. I mean, look, there are things that I would disagree with Laura Kelly if I were sitting on the floor, but occasionally I might applaud to her. There are things that I disagree with Brandon Whipple, but if I happened to attend a State of the City, I might applaud if he said something that I agreed with. What is the state of politics in America today if we can't agree with a cancer survivor who wants to be a cop, or a kid that just got admitted to West Point because he wants to serve his country? How sad is that they can't at least find those moments to unify and applaud? So that's the state. And conversely, let us hope that in maybe 12 years, when we're no longer in the White House, let's hope that we never do the same, that we never stoop to their level, because it'll be a sad state if we get to that point. So that's kind of what I would open with, and I will let Andy.
Well, hey guys, it's good to be back up here. Yeah, I completely agree with the state of politics today. I'm always the eternal optimist, so I always see kind of the bright side of things, but it was truly sad what we saw on Tuesday. What I'm excited about is that how irrelevant Democrats really are in the political scene today, right? Because of how nasty they are. I mean, we really saw, it may be a slim majority, but we have a majority in the House, we have a majority in the Senate, we have the presidency, and essentially we have the Supreme Court as well. So this is the dying off of the nastiness of the rabies-infested animal that's in the corner right now. And to me, I've always said this is good news either way, however it goes. Number one, they find the error of their ways. They reflect on themselves to figure out what they've done wrong. They rebrand themselves to come back to be more, relevant or even relatable to the constituency. And I always throw out there the Chuck Schumer last year during 4th of July, having a picture of him with a piece of cheese on a raw burger patty, like, I'm grilling just like you. I mean, that's what, these guys are nuts, and they try to be so relatable to us, and it comes off so cheesy when Kamala Harris is out on late night TV trying to drink beers, and you had Pocahontas there doing their live stream. You want a beer? I want a beer. Let's get a beer. And, they're just nuts. They try so hard, and it comes off so awkward that if they figure that out, and they come back to the middle and they realize, you know what, we've had the error of our ways. We're going to start working with Republicans, work a little bit more mainstream. At the end of the day, that's good for America, right? Is it going to happen? I don't know, probably not anytime soon. Or they continue to go down the road that they're going down. They double down, they reinforce their ideological identity, politics, and madness, and they self-implode and they die off, which is good for us as well. So either way, the way the culture's going and the pendulum, the way it shifted, either way, it's good news for America, right? Either they start coming back to us and we can work together again and we get the old school JFK style Democrat, or they just die off and become some third party socialist movement that's not going to be relevant and we're just going to keep the dominance. The problem is that whether Republicans can actually work together to keep that momentum going and do what we say we're going to do. Coming out of what happened in Goodland this past weekend, first off, I've never been on that side of things, so now being the vice chair for the state Republican Party, a little bit different from both being on the radio from the outside, third-party objector watching it happen, to being one that's inside now, that obviously, things got a little rowdy, I guess, during the meeting, which is good because we have independent thought, and I like that, but then what we saw at the end of it, for the most part, was the Republican Party coming together to realize we're moving in the same direction and we can get a lot done. And if we keep that type of unity, then I think we're going to be in a really good state moving forward, because we have midterms next year, we have major races, we have a way to where usually after primaries we like to beat each other up quite a bit, and that's not healthy for the party. And if we can find a way to unify regardless of whatever primary turnouts happen for governor's races, legislative races, whatever, that we can unite behind for the general election, and we do what we say we're going to do, I sense that we are going to be in the golden age, is what Trump says, and we're going to see a lot of success for the next few years. But we have to keep doing what we're doing, and we just kind of let Democrats do whatever they do, and they can self-implode or fix their own you-know-whats, and we'll see them on the other side. So I'm optimistic, and I think that we're moving in the right direction right now.
One thing I would follow up on what Andy said is the come together. We're going to have some contentious races. I mean, obviously, right now, the last count that I've heard is 11 candidates who are thinking about exploring, have got exploratory committees, or have already announced an intention to run for governor. So with that many in the race, there's going to be, it's going to be a volatile primary, shall we say. But what we can't afford is, come August of next year, for us to then fracture again. And my guy didn't win, so I'm not going to vote, or I'm going to have another Dennis Pyle situation where we then enable whoever the Dems put forward, and there have been a few names, to sneak into the race. Keep in mind, Laura Kelly hasn't won a popular vote. She's never gotten that 50% threshold. And yet we've had her in office. By then it'll be 8 years, and we've enabled that. The Republicans in Kansas have enabled that, either by voting for her or not coalescing behind our nominee for whatever reason. Too extreme, not conservative enough, didn't check enough boxes for me. Whatever reason, frankly, it's our fault. If we'd come together, we wouldn't have had to deal with 8 years of Laura Kelly. So the one thing that I think, and as a state vice chair and as a county chair, the one thing that we have to do is make sure that when we emerge from the primary, beaten, battered, and broke, that we get together and back whoever emerges in the general, because they're going to be ready over there. We need to make sure that we're ready over here to take them on. And the same thing goes for our school board candidates. There are some folks that are looking already at, in particular, USD 259. And we have 3 phenomenal Republicans who have worked hard under very difficult circumstances to help deliver a Republican message on the Wichita School Board, which is not a friendly environment for Republicans. And we need to make sure that we get those 3 reelected. It's very important that we get Kathy and Hazel and Diane reelected. And if we can get them an ally, Lord knows what we could do over there. But we certainly need to get the 3 of them reelected. So let's make sure we focus on that as well.
I know we're going to do some Q&A and just kind of banter and go off on whatever topics you want to go off of, but just to feed off of that real quickly, I will say that the activism that we have on our side right now is insanely exciting because usually after elections, especially after a presidential election, things kind of die off and taper. We get, all right, we did our job, we went and voted, we're going to just get back to our normal grind. That's not happening. I mean, there's so much activism right now and so much excitement behind the scenes. I think really watching Trump do what he does, which I say on the radio all the time, I'm tired just trying to keep up to report on what he's doing. I don't know how he's doing it himself, but the guy's insane, and that's keeping the momentum going. I'm sure John sees it as well, but like radio ratings, even radio ratings for talk radio dip off a little bit after elections because people are exhausted about hearing the issues. They're not. I mean, we're still cranking along, which is really cool to see, and there's a lot of momentum. So if I don't want us to get burnt out, but if we can keep that momentum going by the time we go into next year, that momentum from the grassroots activism all over the country is going to be really impressive to watch, and they're not going to be able to stop us.
Can I borrow that? That way we're not, you just keep that one and I'll keep this one.
All right, there we go.
One thing I want to mention, you're Derby, right? Yeah, one thing I want to mention, Blake Carpenter called me the other day, my former roommate, office mate. Derby's a good example because you've got 4 or 5 solid conservatives on the Derby School Board, 4, who are either dropping off or up for re-election. 3. There's a great example. They've been able to really make some inroads, but now we have an opportunity there that the Dems may eye. So we also have to focus on these rural school districts. I live in the Goddard School District. My property taxes have gone up 18% in the last year alone thanks to the Goddard School District. The only way that's ever going to change is if we change out some of these school boards at the local levels as well. So obviously USD 259 is the big monster in the room because of their budget. But these rural school districts are just as important because they also have a major impact. I mean, a superintendent out in Goddard gets a $300,000 a year contract, and it's a 3-year deal, and they renew it every year. And you ask, why do they renew that every year? Well, they renew it every year. That way, if there's a change on the school board, he still has a 3-year contract. Amazing how that works. Nice little deal he's got, nice gig he's got going there. Well, the only way to fix that thing is to change out the school board. So we have to focus on some of these other races where we can make an impact. So when you start seeing the Sedgwick County Republican Party or some of these other Republican parties reaching out to you to get your help to door knock or write a check or make a phone call, know that we're doing that for a reason. And I will pledge to you, at least at the county level, we're not going to focus on races that we can't win. But when we do reach out, we are going to reach out and try and swing these seats. And trust me, Ben's going to work some more this fall because I'm going to use him because he's proven he's successful.
Yeah. It's exciting. Yeah. And I think at the state level, we're going to see the same thing. I mean, right now, I love what Dan Hawkins said when we won this last election, that we don't just have a supermajority, we have a functioning supermajority in the state legislature because we are able to not only win more seats, but then rid out some of those that pretended to be Republicans and fought against the agenda. And if we keep that momentum going, we're going to be unstoppable. Like, we can really just cramp that. And then we get a Republican governor on top of that. Can you imagine? My gosh, we could actually have that single rate tax plan. We could do the property tax relief. We could do the Supreme Court reforms on how we nominate our justices in the state of Kansas. Like, how incredible is that?
We could actually get real school choice.
I mean, real fundamental school choice, something that we will never get with a Democrat governor.
Let's do some Q&A.
Sure.
Let's do it.
All right, now you'll have to take this back.
Oh, that's right.
John,
We could talk about whatever we want to, so I mean, that's...
all we're going to do first, I'm going to ask John a question, and then members, have your hands up high. We're going to do a lot of questions today, and these guys can answer the best they can on those questions. But the question that I have is that you did not mention the city of Wichita also has an election.
Oh, yeah.
So comment on that.
Yeah, so we have multiple, 3 city council seats that are up. There are a couple that are tough. Brandon Johnson's seat is up. There are already 2 Democrats that have declared for that seat. I know that Brian Fry and Kim and I have had a couple of meetings with some Republicans who are interested. That's a tough seat. That's a very tough seat. The R's, D's, and U's, Republicans, Democrats, and unaffiliateds in that district, that's a toughie. We will try, but you don't throw good money after bad, so that would be a tough one. The seat that we can swing is Mike Hoheisel's. That's a district that has been represented by a Republican in the past. We have had multiple conversations with multiple Republican candidates. There is a very promising candidate that you would know the name but has not run for office before. And we're meeting with that particular individual. I think it would be a candidate that everybody would be inspired by. But there are a couple of Republicans. I will tell you that the Republican Party will back if there's one Republican. If there's two, we don't play in primaries. So it's not our function. We'll give equal access and equal opportunity and share the resources with every. And then once we're in the general, it's Katie bar the door. Because our job is to beat Democrats, period. And trust me, that is my primary function. Maggie Ballard's the same kind of thing. That's a tough. I mean, Ben, what do the RSDs and U's look like over there? It's pretty tough in that area. Is it winnable?
Better than Brandon's, but it would be very tough. And yeah, it would be. I think it would be easier to win Brandon's seat than it would be to beat.
Yeah, I think you're right. And again, that's the kind of Republican, if we were to get there, might not appeal to a lot of us ideologically, but it would still be a Republican. So it would be an improvement, but it's a tough race. And then the question then becomes, do you take what limited resources do we have and put it in a race where you have a 30% chance of winning? Or do you put your resources into a race where you have a 60 to 75% chance of winning? So.
Okay, looks like Ginger's first. You've got that big hand back up.
So you're kind of was making comments about the Goddard district and the bond. I'm on the Goddard School Board. With all of the housing duplexes that is being built, our schools are almost at capacity, especially the elementary schools. Our bond is to raise money to buy property to build 2 more elementaries and then to renovate Oak Street Elementary into an early learning center. If you're against it, what do you propose that we do? I mean, I understand nobody wants their property taxes to go up. I understand that. But we're having to look ahead because we've already got another 5,900 projects that are approved in the Goddard district to be built.
Well, I'm not as familiar with your budget as I am with some of the others, but I also know from the last time when I actually served in the legislature over Goddard, and the rest of the district out in southwest Sedgwick County, I can tell you the district has plenty of cash reserves. I'd have to pull it up. I could go on Kansas Open Gov, but I guarantee you they're sitting on $100 million or more in reserves. I guarantee you they've got plenty in their capital outlay fund. So oftentimes what we'll see is the same thing we saw in USD 259's case. It's not a matter of they can't afford it, it's a matter of they don't want to afford it. And it's easier to go to the taxpayers and ask for more money than it is to do what the rest of us have to do. You know, budget's tight, I may have to cancel my Disney Plus subscription this month. Well, I would suggest that that's what Dr. Henry should do, is rather than go to the taxpayers and ask people who are already being taxed out of their homes, I would say, be fiscally disciplined and find ways to build the new schools without raising taxes. Sorry. I got a loud mouth, but I can.
We all know that.
I know that.
Yes, we do know that. Yes.
We've got a question here, John.
I got a couple of questions. One is, we all know that President Trump wants to impose some tariffs. Is it going to affect the state of Kansas and Wichita? I read in the news that we are going to lose some jobs in Wichita. What do you think about that?
It's a good question. So about the tariffs and whether we lose some jobs here in Kansas, I'm sure we'll lose some, probably mostly like federal employees that are working here in Kansas. We might lose some of those. I know the biggest concern right now has been in the agricultural sector on how that's going to affect, especially with some were really upset for a while about some of the cuts with the USAID, even though we've seen the ridiculous amount of spending that was going on there, and they cut that program by near 90%. But some of the stuff they were doing that was the original intent of that program was actually for agricultural products and food to go across the board, which the government should be involved in some of that. I think the majority of that honestly should come back down to the state level. I know our governors for years have gone to other nations and created trade deals for agricultural products, and I think that we can rebuild that at the state level and actually make that more secure through the private sector as well. So, I mean, are we going to lose some? Yeah, I think that we're actually losing some IRS workers in Kansas City. Blast. Gas. I mean, I'm totally okay with some IRS workers losing some of their jobs in Kansas City and Overland Park in that area. So that's all that I've heard so far specifically. If we do lose some more, I mean, look, I mean, we've seen that there was a report that just came out yesterday, 178,000 jobs were laid off in January because of, February, because of the layoffs of federal workers and the cancellation of government contracts to different companies, which there's, of course, the media's throwing a fit saying that, you know, now we have all these jobless claims and we're shaking up the economy and so many more people are unemployed. At the end of the day, though, the private sector can absorb that and it's going to be more stable anyways, because when a government signs a contract for a worker to do a project, we're just redistributing wealth. It's nothing more than socialism. We're just signing, the government's doing it and just using taxpayer money to fund that project, as opposed to a private sector that would sign a contract and get the job done probably more efficiently, a lot less cheaper, and we don't have to worry about the stupid government being involved in the first place. So I think we're going through the reset right now with the shakiness, but once we come out on the other end, then it's going to be way better because the government's going to be involved in a lot less.
Another question is about, you know better than me about AM radio, FM, AM, FM, there's XM, and I heard saying that Congress may pass a law which will, you don't have any more public broadcasting system, PBS.
Yeah, so a lot of that funding, and I don't know if you want to chime in on this too, John, but a lot of the funding for PBS, NPR radio, public radio was coming through USAID. Not only for us, but for like PBS in Uganda or something ridiculous. So I don't know why we were funding Sesame Street over in, you know, random places. But I mean, yeah, that's been a conversation for a while on whether we're going to see the ending of federal funding for National Public Radio and PBS, public broadcasting, which I would say is a good thing, because if you're going to compete in the private sector, then you need to compete in the private sector and use, you know, advertising dollars like how we get our paychecks on the radio as well and keep our radio stations up and going. Because what's happened is that they've taken over and really dominated so many different airwaves, and their quality isn't very good. For those that don't remember, there used to be a liberal national syndicated company for radio called Air America, and it was a progressive network, and they had some really ridiculous hosts. They had Ed Schultz, they had Randy Rhodes, they had there was a guy in Denver that worked for them that I knew, David Sirota. He used to tell me, because when I was interning and just getting into radio, he was actually doing the local station there in Denver. David Sirota at that time said that Barack Obama was a flaming right conservative Republican. Yeah, that's how crazy that guy was. And he was on the Air America. Shockingly, that network went out of business because they couldn't function in the private sector. So if you want to compete in the private sector, then you need to appeal to the people that actually want to listen to your garbage. So yeah, I'm all for cutting NPR and PBS broadcasting out of government.
I would just say I know Congress has already, I think the House has already passed a bill to mandate that AM stay in cars. I think it's in the Senate. I would imagine now that Chuck Schumer is no longer in charge of the Senate, I think you'll see that bill come through. So.
Okay, another question back here. The Department of Education seems to be the first on the chopping block. What is going to be the effect on the states, especially Kansas? I saw a report on news about special education. They said money comes from federal.
Yeah, I saw that. Actually, I saw in our news coverage last night. I record all three of the local broadcasts so I can watch it and stay informed. And the first thing they did was go to the NEA, the teachers union, for comment. And amazingly enough, the teachers union was just very upset, and they were so concerned their hair was on fire because, you know, it's going to just ruin all of our schools. What's going to happen is the money would then be block granted back to the states, and who knows better what to do with your schools than your state does, than your local school board does. So I think in the end, the funding wouldn't change, it would just be better allocated. your state board of education, your local board of education. Right now, we take our tax dollars, we send it to Washington, D.C., it gets run through whatever cockamamie filter they have, and then they send it back to us, a portion of it, with strings attached. Why not just keep our money here and let us figure out how to spend our money? We know how to educate our kids better than Washington, D.C. does. So I think it's a great idea. I'd like to see us do away. I mean, we don't need Washington, D.C. telling us how to educate our kids. That'd be my take on it.
All right. Got a question here, Andy? You ready for the next one?
Yeah, let's do it.
Lots of issues out there. Supreme Court, how that's done, some at the federal level. If you guys had to focus on just one or two issues that we really need to focus on, what would be?
There's so many, you can't narrow us down like that. I would, I don't know. I mean, me being the dork that I am, that I enjoy, economic talk on the radio program, I say right now the biggest issue that we've had, and two biggest issues that we've had that I've really focused on the programs has been the budget for the federal government, state government as well. Because I always say we can talk about social issues, we can talk about marijuana, we can talk about all these other education, we can talk about all these other issues that are good, but unless we have a stable economy, none of it matters. I mean, all the other nations throughout history have collapsed because their economy crashed because they didn't spend things appropriately and they got out of hand and it went bankrupt and they collapsed. They couldn't sustain what they did. So all the other issues to me out there are important, but we can't have those conversations unless we actually have a stable economy. So, what DOGE is doing is amazing. What we need to continue to cut is amazing. I know that this new budget proposal they're looking at in DC is cutting like $1 billion over the next 10 years. It's a good start. That's $200 million or $200 billion a year, $100 billion a year for, however long they're looking to do that. That's a good start, but here's the thing. Before Barack Obama really started doing the crazy stuff he did in the early 2000s, we were spending, and we had an actual, 12 appropriations bills. We actually had a full-on budget. It was actually passed. And we were capping government spending, which is what the budget's supposed to do, at like 18 to 20% of the actual GDP. So that way, we didn't spend more than what the GDP was growing, and we could keep the government somewhat sustained. Since we got rid of that, and we're doing the omnibus packages and the continuing resolutions and the Nancy Pelosi, we have to pass it to see what's in it mindset, we're now spending at 120% of the GDP. So if we stole every penny from man, woman, child, and business in the entire private sector, we still couldn't pay off what the government's currently spending. And that to me is insane. So the federal budget right now that's at $6.75 trillion, I know it's kind of a pipe dream. I want to see that entire budget at like 1.5. Like, I want to see massive, I want to get back to 20% spending at the GDP and cap what they can do. And that way that restrains what we're kind of going through right now with DOGE and exposing some of the garbage that they've been spending on lately. So I think that's the big issue, number one. Number two, real quickly, is I think, which is, in my opinion, the ESG movement. And we're starting to see that go away now, which is good news. But the ESG, to me, at the federal level, was what was causing some of the DEI and the wokeness in society by creating essentially a social credit score by default, by mandating how businesses are allowed to operate, by having this wokeness infiltrating into their businesses. Some of them didn't even want to do that, but they were forced to do so by government mandates, or we'd cancel your government contracts or your grants, we'd cancel your bank accounts, and we'd close things down. And I think that was changing culture and society drastically. So good news is I think we're starting to see that go to the wayside, but I think that's another issue that's kind of an umbrella that's causing so many other minor issues around the nation if we can get rid of that.
Okay, got a question for Jim. John, did you want to respond?
Yeah, absolutely. I will give you 2.5. The half is the border. The best line for me, one of the best lines of the State of the Union was when the president said, we've said for years, the Biden administration said for years that we needed to pass this, or we needed to do this, and we needed to do that to close the border. It turns out all we needed was a new president. If you look at it, the border crossings are down 96% since Biden's high in 2023. So I think that was a major problem. However, you can't say it's fixed. It is significantly improved. They just need to put in place procedures to actually permanently fix it. So that's the half. I will echo what he said. We have a serious, serious spending problem in our country and in our state. And Andy addressed the federal issues. And I will preface this by saying one of my dearest friends in the legislature is our Speaker of the House, and they're doing yeoman's work. And I love Ty Masterson. But if there was only one criticism I would give them is they still spend way too much money. They've just released a budget, and it's an improvement. And their budget still cuts Laura Kelly's, but they're still spending too much money. We spend too much in Kansas. It is unsustainable, and they've got to stop spending money. It is unsustainable, and at some point, we're going to run out of other people's money. But for me, we need to get Christ-centered government back in at the federal and the state level. I think we've lost some of our moral foundations in our country. I think we're starting to see that back. But when you see the trans nonsense, the non-binary nonsense, the threats to the value and the sanctity of life, for me, that's as important as anything else. Because if you've lost your moral core, if you've lost what made you the beacon on a hill, if you've lost your spiritual groundings, the rest of it is nonsense.
Maybe one of you more than the other one, but I hear John frequently, you talk about AM radio in cars. Kind of like Dr. Ray's question, but might as well put more pointed here. As a conservative that likes free market, I don't want to mandate people to put in cars. Consumers should pick that. Manufacturers should sell what people want to buy.
I'll take this.
So why, it seems to be inconsistent to be a conservative and then actually mandate what cars have to put in there to sell to their consumers. And maybe you both agree on that, maybe you don't. I'm not sure both of you possible.
The whole purpose of putting it in there is because if it's not in there, then I can't choose to play it or not. That's why they're putting it in there, is because I can't have that option if the vehicle manufacturers are intentionally leaving it out. And the reason they started putting it out is because the administration, it really isn't this. It's not a cost issue. It's the administration that came in and said, we don't like talk radio, it's gaining too much power, so we don't want the audience to be able to have access to it. It's really what their intention was. It's not that expensive to have an option within the dash. It really they used the cost factor as a red herring. So yeah, and I'm with you. Trust me, I don't like mandates, but that's my take. I don't know if you want to disagree.
Yeah,
but
well, no. I mean, it goes a little bit deeper than that. I mean, the reason that they really, and Roger Marshall, God bless him, Senator, really advocated to keep AM radio in cars like that was because there's a little bit more, the frequencies between AM and FM frequencies are slightly different, and emergency broadcasts are easier expanded on AM frequencies because they go to a wider range. So just, this is kind of behind the scenes radio technical jargon. For an FM frequency, when you have a tower, it goes straight down like this. So that way only people within that are able to carry it. AM frequencies kind of ride the waves, so they cover a lot longer broadcasts. So for emergency broadcasts, emergency situations, if the power goes out, if there's a zombie apocalypse or UFOs start coming down from the sky, which I cannot wait to happen, then when that happens, then you have a way to actually communicate better than FM radios because AM frequencies travel a much further distance. We still get, as a program director, I get emails all the time because they have, a lot of these ham radio stuff and all around the world, and you can actually catch 15, 20-second blips of stations from literally around the world. I get emails from Finland all the time where they pick up a 20-second piece of our 1480 frequency on the AM. So it's more of a security issue for that to make sure that it stays there. We just happen to utilize it for our conservative content, but it's more for a security thing of saying you have to have both frequencies for those emergency types of situations.
This is probably more directed at John. Okay, we are
target today.
We are currently pursuing potential candidates for the Derby School Board. Some are rebutting, we don't know about some. What can we tell them that they can look for as support? I mean, other than Ken Gish's great boots on the ground, what other type of things can we tell them that Sedgwick County can help them with?
Well, one thing and I know Donna and I have talked, one thing that we need to do is make sure that we're working together. There have been, in the past, I think sometimes the groups work in cross purposes, which is why I know that we've tried to make sure that we work together so that this group doesn't recruit a candidate and this group recruits a candidate and somebody else does. And so we end up with an unnecessary primary. So, and again, if there ends up with a primary, then there's nothing the Sedgwick County or the state party for that matter can do other than open the doors and make the resources to voter data and that kind of stuff available to you, to all Republicans. For example, one of the things that I know I'd like to do, we do some fundraising and we've been successful last year. We're going to do some more fundraising and we will help with get out the vote efforts via text, via mailers, things like that. But we will only be able to do that for all candidates in the race. I can't target a specific race if there's more than one GOP candidate. That's kind of things. Access to GOP voter data, things like that are areas that we can help. We also are now partnering with the Estes campaign with the office, and we will do organized calling and advanced ballot chasing. We had a great effort last year to chase advanced ballots. It's something we're going to do this year so that we have folks coming in, and when those advanced ballots come in, we want to call them and make sure that we're reaching out to you. We've also, like you said, Kim is phenomenal at registering. We're going to do that to help make sure that we get registered, get new people registered to vote, and then make sure they turn out the vote. So those are areas that we can do to elevate all candidates so that we're doing it not just for a Derby race, but for every race in Sedgwick County. We may do targeted mailers. We'll see how much money we can raise.
Okay, question over here.
This pertains to who actually writes the employment contracts for government employees. Case in point, I saw on television a while back that some teachers that were so disqualified from their job that they were assigned to report to an adult daycare. And all they did was just stand in the room and drink coffee all day.
Well, Senate, the United States Congress is basically an adult daycare, so Sorry, Jennifer, I didn't mean to, certain exceptions.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would like to see who actually writes these government contracts. I will say, though, that if it is the heads of maybe the cabinet members and the people that Trump's appointing, do we not have like the best cabinet ever right now? Holy cow. Holy cow. I've been almost just as excited and giddy about seeing these confirmations come in as I was when Trump actually got elected. And now, unfortunately, like Dan Bongino, who, KQAM's had his radio program, he's going off the air because he accepted his job as deputy director for the FBI. We're sad to see him go on the radio. I'm devastated. However, watching him and Kash Patel go in and just clean house at the FBI, come on, man. Come on. That's going to be great.
Yeah, I understand by not picking candidates to support, in the primary, but there's no leadership there. Like you've got 11 candidates you think coming up for one. I think they all ought to be instructed by the leadership in the party. You don't talk bad about the other one, remember Reagan? And also, give them the talking points that will win. Because we should have won a lot of elections, and we didn't have any leadership to guide the people. So
yeah, I will say on that, I think, the candidate, I think, needs to be the leader. I mean, if they're going to represent us, then they need to be a leader. I'm with you on like the guidelines of like, let's not, let's show the differences between us and the primary. The way I see the Republican Party, which is what always frustrates me in the primaries versus general, is, in the primary, we're kind of like that Italian family. We yell at each other, smack each other on the head at the dinner table, what are you doing kind of thing. And we go after each other, but then we don't unite as the front, as the family after that primary to go into the general. So I'm with you when it comes to let's not get nasty with each other in the primary. Let's show some differences. This is what I believe in. Maybe this person has a little bit weaker record, but it's not like they're a complete liberal and whatever, unless they are, I don't know. But we need to show this is what I stand for and this is what I'm going to do as your representative and whatever level that is, school board all the way up to, a congressional leader. Then the voters, that's when we decide. And that's when we say, I want the party to go this direction. I've always said that, to me at least, it's party over person in the general election. The primary is when we set that tone to know exactly what the party is going to stand for and what direction we're going to go. And I think that's up to the voters to decide. I want to see exactly what they stand for. If we give them talking points, they may say it, but will they actually follow through with it? I want to know exactly what they stand for deep inside, what they're actually going to fight for when they get into office.
I will tell you that trust me, I've heard the same thing expressed. You're the ones who can hold them accountable for that. You need to tell candidates that I don't want to hear that. We don't appreciate that. If you go to those levels, I won't vote for you. You're the ones who can moderate their behavior. The party, trust me, I've had conversations with 7 of the candidates who are thinking about it, toying with it, throwing their names in around, whatever. And we kind of tell them, hey, good luck, can't wait. The Sedgwick County Republican Party is going to host a forum once things actually kick off. And we'll have 2 media partners, a television and a radio station, and we'll probably partner with the Republican Women United and the State Party and a few others, and we'll have a nice venue. But, there's not much more we can do other than to provide them and set up some ground rules. Beyond that, if they want to engage in that, that's up to you to tell them what you like and what you don't like. And if you want it to be clean, tell them you want it to be clean. Sadly, having been around in campaigns for over 30 years, negative works. So, those tactics, as much as we don't like them, they tend to work. You just need to let them know, I don't want to hear that stuff. It's not, is there anything more we could say? Yeah.
I'm part of several different email groups, and I've had a little trouble keeping track of the finances of the state Republican Party.
Ooh, that's all yours.
I've only been there a couple of days. No, I will say that is our number 1 priority is the state party. Denidre ran on the fact that the very first thing we're doing is we're going to audit the state Republican finances for the past 8 years. We have an actual budget committee meeting on Monday night that everybody on the budget committee for the state party is already convening. Our new treasurer, Roger Lomchek, he's already gotten onto the bank accounts. We've already canceled the debit and credit card or debit cards for the previous leadership. We've already taken hold of that. We've gotten all of the expenditures. We know exactly how much is in the account, which I don't know if I'm supposed to see right now or not. I just found out last night. But what I will say is after officially our financial committee meeting on Monday night, I will have more information and details. But yes, the very first thing that we were doing is we already have donors lined up for it, and we're doing a complete audit of the entire state finances for the state party for like 8 years back to know exactly what's going on. So we are going to have things intact, we are going to move forward, and we are going to be in a lot better position for the midterms next year.
Transparency, go ahead and tell us, we won't tell anybody.
Transparency, yeah. I will say this, I have a general estimate. I don't want to give numbers that aren't accurate right now. So I know vaguely now that we've officially gotten onto the account. I will know more after next week, and then we can disclose that. So yes.
It's not $1 million.
It is not $1 million, I can say that.
Well, it should be, but you guys need more instead of less. But the question I have is a practical political question. In 2022, we had a candidate who ran for governor, and he brought in the incredible athlete, Riley Gaines, and she supported him. They tried to make an issue out of the fact that men should not be participating in women's sports, and our governor running for re-election, Laura Kelly, took the opposite position. We've been told that's an 80-20 issue. Why didn't that work for our candidate, Derek Schmidt, at that time? What can we do to preserve and protect women's sports going forward? Because I believe this is an 80-20 issue that would resonate with voters.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is an 80-20 issue, and I don't know that that was necessarily the factor on why Derek Schmidt maybe won or lost the governor's race in the last time, but I agree it's probably an 80-20 issue. I think it's a no-brainer, which is why we saw the latest, override of the governor's veto that she just did again on this issue, which is ridiculous because she knew she was going to lose it. We have again that functioning supermajority. She knew she wasn't going to win on this one. The smart thing would have been to not even sign it, just let it become law automatically after the legislature had passed it this year, but we overrid it. So, it is an important issue, and I think that we are going to stay on it now that they've tried to push it. But honestly, I think generally, culturally, now with Trump in office, most of that I think is going to start dying off. I really think, there's that fringe, loud, very vocal group that's a fringe on the other side that's going to keep it going. But people have had enough, and I noticed that, was it last year, 2 years ago? If you remember the video that surfaced of the at the airport, where the guy was just trying to get a ticket for the holidays towards the end of the year, trying to get home or something, and then the flight attendant mentioned the wrong pronoun, and the dude went off, just lost his mind. And the flight attendant said, "Do you want me to help you get your ticket or not? You can bicker about what I called you. I'm just trying to help you get home for the holidays." And I think that was an indicator of where most people in the country have just had enough of that crap and just don't care. And I think with Trump in office now and him removing DEI out of the federal government, removing it out of public education, I think that it's going to try and linger, but honestly, I think that conversation's a dying breed now. And I hope so. I hope it just kind of dries up and shrivels away.
What he said.
I want to thank you guys both for being here today. Appreciate very much what you both do. Andy mentioned donors, and in a county the last 8 years are going to hire an independent accountant to do that.
Say that again now. So what about donors?
Independent audit.
Yeah, it will be an independent group. Yes, we are looking for an independent outside organization to do that audit. Yes. Yeah, and that's why we're looking for the donors, so we can pay a legitimate company to actually do that audit. Yes.
You're writing a check? Larry Dom.
Okay, question, John?
Thanks, guys, for being here. Andy, I couldn't agree more with your comments about living with the federal government members within its budget. What's your view on what's going to happen with the federal debt?
Well, look, we're $36 trillion in federal debt right now. And if we can cut, according to Elon Musk, he said that if we can cut the federal government by about $2 trillion, which again, I'm good to cut like $4 trillion, but he says if we can cut $2 trillion, that the GDP can actually grow itself and we can see enough prosperity in the country enough to begin actually paying down that debt. And we can actually get a balanced budget and move forward. So we're on the right track. And then Donald Trump, of course, during the State of the Union made his address of, the gold card of people investing, businesses from foreign nations to come in, hire employees, create new jobs, and to pay that money to get their expedited path to citizenship. I'm good with that too. He thinks that that's going to create like $40 trillion of revenue. I don't know if that's going to be the case, but I think that that's going to be on the right path. So now we have multiple different business leaders, business-minded people, Trump, Elon Musk, and others that are now looking at the budget and saying, this is insane. How can you operate this way? Not to mention, in 45 days, we've already seen more than $2 or $3 trillion in investment of new business announced, with the AI project that Trump announced, with the new computer chip project that they just announced, with all these companies coming into the country. That I think that we're optimistically, this is weird for me to say for the federal government, I'm optimistic that we might actually see some traction on paying off some of that $36 trillion in debt.
So I'm going to take a different approach on this, John. The 2026 Kansas state budget projection shows that the state is $480 million short of funding its expenses. So we're okay now, but in 26 we're $480 million short. And right now they're figuring out how they can get their money they need to spend that. And my take is, why aren't we cutting spending so that we don't have to worry about making up that $480 million? Since I left the legislature, the government, the Kansas budget has bloomed 62% since I left the legislature. And I would beg to get anyone in this room to tell me what you have received from the state of Kansas in the, what are we at now, 6 years, 7 years, since that has justified a 60% increase in spending. What's improved? Sure, they've dumped more money into K through 12, but the scores aren't improved. In fact, for the most part, they're either flat or down. So what has justified a 60% increase in spending? So, yes, the federal deficit's an issue, but the state's got a spending problem. And until they just stop the insanity, this is just going to continue. And again, this is, and I love them dearly, and they're doing yeoman's work, but at some point, somebody up there has got to say no. And I don't know what will change until they do.
Okay, one last question.
Yep, thanks for your time. And this is kind of an odd question. One of the things I love about President Trump is that he has really not reinvigorated and added a lot of courage to the party. And I think we saw that on display on Tuesday night. So here's the odd question. For both of you, and you both do this in your radio shows, but I'm asking you in terms of party leadership. What does it look like for the Kansas and Sedgwick County Republican parties to finally have a spine?
It's a great question. Yeah. You're right. That has been the biggest frustration for so many Republican voters for so many years. At the county, at the state levels across the nation, is that, let's take D.C. for an example, that every time they would get the majority, they would get scared and not do what they said they wanted to do. They didn't want to repeal Obamacare. They didn't want to do it because, well, the media would come after us. You know, we can't have this. We got to look towards the next election. I don't want to upset so much of my constituency. I'm walking the line. They were spineless, and that's been a criticism, I think, for both of us on the radio for years. Trump, you said, has revigorated that, and I think at the county levels now, at the state level, I think that elected officials here in Kansas, I think that now we just don't care. We finally hit that point we don't care. We just don't care. We're going to get done what we need to get done. That's why the latest poll from CNN just ran the story that 54% of Americans from a CNN poll liked what Doge is doing, cutting the government, even though like you said, the hair's on fire from the other side about all this government cuts. So yeah, we finally just don't care. At the same time, it helps that the media is in such shambles and they look so foolish in the last election that they don't hold anything over us anymore. And the Democrat Party at the national and statewide levels are so broken because their entire agenda was completely thrown out. They're going through their own identity crisis. And we've banned most of the genders that they've tried to identify as a party, but they're trying to find themselves moving forward with this self-reflection, trying to figure out what they're going to look like moving forward. So because they're broken and the media holds no bar over us whatsoever, I think that has emboldened us all over the nation, and especially here in Kansas, to finally say, we're going to get done what we can get done and use the Democrat tactic, which is they're going to push the envelope as far as they can until it's not popular, and then know that Republicans aren't going to repeal it. So whenever, however long that takes for the pendulum to swing back the other way, they get power again, they can have a new starting point and keep on with their agenda, because we've never gotten to that point and said, yeah, we're going back this way, we're not doing this anymore. And I think finally we're starting to do that, which is why they've never been in this position and they don't know how to respond. We have to keep that momentum. So for the Kansas Committee on Government Efficiency, let's do the same thing we're doing at the federal level with this COJ. Let's cut, like you said, cut spending. Let's look at the agencies. Let's push back. And whatever freak out mode that they do on the other side, I don't care. They're irrelevant right now. We have the majorities and we're going to do what we want. And, you know, they can kiss our you-know-whats.
So since you asked it as a party, I'll take off the radio hat and put on the chair hat. You know, this question is about leadership at the party level. So, you know, we've spent in the past time worrying about bipartisanship and reaching across the aisle, and those are great ideas once you're elected. But our job is fundamentally, oh yeah, we need to raise money, we need to do that, but our job is to beat Democrats. And that needs to be our focus. Recruit good candidates and raise money and then beat their butts. And so that has to be our focus. And in order to do that, we'll need to raise the money and we'll need to recruit good candidates and focus our resources in the races that we can win. But fundamentally, that has to be our primary goal, is to win. And I think that needs to be what we focus on. And anything else that we're, as leaders in the party, if we're not focused on beating Democrats, then we're not focused on the right things. And so I think that's kind of what, as our leadership team, we want to invigorate our base. We want everybody excited. We're trying to bring in new speakers in Sedgwick County and do some fun things and change the website and do this. And that's all really to keep people energized, so that when we then come down and say, we're going to do door knocking and we're going to do this, and it's because you're motivated to do that so that we can beat them, because trust me, they're motivated to beat us. One real quick, speaking of, we really do need to have you come out tomorrow for this AFP rally. The liberal crackpots will be there. They will be there in force. They will try to do to Ron Estes what they did out in Oakley, to Roger Marshall. They're going to make asses out of themselves, and we need to have enough of us there so when they chime up, we can chant USA and shout them down. So if you have time, please come to Andy and I are moderating, hosting, whatever, emceeing. We will be there, but we need you to come tomorrow down to Union Station for this rally for Ron. Support Ron Estes because the crackpots will be there. We need to have our crackpots there to shout them down. So.
All right, next week, we're just gonna come back to